Right.
And we should now be live. Hello, everyone. We'll be starting in just a second. Just getting our stuff
Twitter's sent out.
ready here. Let me test my voice recorder. Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing 1, 2, 3. Yeah, that's fine. Let's turn on focus assist so no notifications come in. And is there something else I want to do? Not that I can remember. Oh, I want to retweet the tweet. That's right.
I would, but
as we'll talk about, Dan count. I'm ready to go when you're.
Okay. I am now recording.
I am now recording as well.
3, 2, 1. Welcome to the Windows Central Podcast, episode 187 for July 17th, 2020. Hey everyone, Gene Rubino here, joined with Zach Bowden for another exciting episode of the Windows Central Podcast, where we talk all things Microsoft and Windows and Surface and Xbox and what other big tech news happened in the week. This week we'll be talking about, well, the Twitter hack, which was kind of a big deal and even affected some of our sites as well as my own account again. So we'll just talk about that and the idea of cybersecurity and how weird that was that day. We'll also talk about the Surface Duo being pushed back, which it's pushed back but early still. So we'll talk about that because Microsoft's official position is still it's not coming till holiday season, but we've been obviously getting some different information. So we'll talk a little bit about that, what that all means, and also maybe why it was pushed back. Latest on Windows 10X. Yes, everybody's very excited about 10X, and we haven't heard much officially from it, but Zach is going to give us the lowdown on what he's hearing, what's been happening behind the scenes. Project X Cloud, Microsoft's game streaming service, has been given a little more details. It is now coming in September officially. It still won't be called X Cloud. We don't know its name, but we'll talk about that news and what it all means. I'll give a little preview of the Lenovo Flex 5G, which is the Qualcomm Snapdragon 8CX and the first 5G laptop that is available. So my review is going up on probably Tuesday. So if you're listening to this recorded, you can probably go read it. But I'll give you guys a sneak peek of what I thought of this device so far. And we'll talk about a few other topics as well. Zach, how are you doing on this fine Friday?
I'm not too bad. It was very dramatic earlier this week with the whole Twitter thing, which was kind of funny as well, to be honest. But yeah, it was weird. How's your week been?
Yeah, well, I'm not, for a shut-in and someone who's borderline a monk in terms of not needing people. I have to admit, like the whole, we're still kind of locked down here a little bit in Massachusetts. We're going through a phase, phase 3, I think it is now, but obviously the rest of the country is going under more growth of the virus, and it's starting to get to me a little bit between that and the heat. It's just like it's a little too hot sometimes to go out.
Yeah.
I miss going to the movies. Yeah, I have a movie theater like literally around the corner from me.
I think the cinemas opened here today, so it'll be interesting to see how popular they are going forward.
Yeah, there's some I thought it was supposed to open, but I don't know. But I miss stuff like that. Obviously, going out for dinner is nice. We've been doing pickup, which is fine. It's better than nothing. But yeah, I miss those little things. It's only, and of course, going to the gym. I went to the gym like 5-6 days a week. Like that was my catharsis at the end of the day. I would, wrap up work, go to the gym, just get my anger and frustrations out, and also not feel like a total sloth.
Yeah.
And now it's just like I have a rowing machine, which helps, but it's not the same as being 2 hours at the gym listening to my music, But at least, technically alive, I guess. So I guess that's good. Let's talk about Twitter, because that was kind of a big deal. That was an odd moment. So this week, I believe it was Wednesday, it was around 5 p.m., maybe 4 p.m. All of a sudden, Elon Musk's Twitter account tweeted out a Bitcoin thing, which was such a weird scam. It was like, give me $1,000 in Bitcoin and I'll double it and give it to you back, which is so weird because that was really the goal. Like if he's just giving money away, why would it just be like $1 in Bitcoin, right? Like why $1,000? And and that was like, okay, that was, Elon Musk's Twitter account got hacked. That's what you get for not using 2FA, and like everybody was dunking on him, like, what was his password? 12345. And then like Bill Gates' Twitter account tweeted it out, the same thing. It's like, oh, okay, that's weird.
Uh-oh.
And then yeah, and then it started happening to like all these other celebrities, whether it was Michael Bloomberg, they got eventually Obama, and who else was it? Joe Biden. There's like Wiz Khalifa, I believe, did it, and Wendy's, I think, was involved. I don't know, but it started spreading from all these major accounts. A lot of them were Bitcoin accounts too, and it was all the same thing. It was basically, and so how the scam worked was Bitcoin is supposed to be kind of an anonymous thing, and you give like this like generated address, and you can send people Bitcoin, and the idea was you send them $1,000 of your Bitcoin and they'll send you back 2,000, which is stupid. And only like 350 people fell for it, but it was enough to drive it over like $100,000 eventually. And it was kind of interesting in the sense that we, as the internet, got to witness in real time live a bank robbery, basically.
Yeah.
A heist at least. Like you can almost make a movie out of it. And it was. So then the question came up, okay, so how did these guys do it? Because at first, if it was one or two counts, you're like, oh, brute force, they just hacked. Maybe they did something like that. But then because of the severity of it and the amount of people doing the same thing, it was just like something else had to be going on. And it was come out now, Vice has done some really good reporting on this at Motherboard, that they got access to employees and specifically their back end panel, where they can oversee people's accounts and control things. And what they were doing was, since if you have back end access through it as a Twitter employee, you can't tweet from someone else's account. That's not allowed, which is nice. Because that could cause all sorts of problems. But what they were doing was they were resetting the email for verification. And that allowed them to then change the password without the person knowing it. And they lost the control of the accounts, and then these people could then tweet from that account. And that's exactly what happened. What's really interesting and disturbing about this is the exact thing that happened to me in June. My account all of a sudden was locked out. So what happened was Twitter was like, hey, we know it's a security thing going on with your account. We don't like it. So you got to go change your password, which is like, okay, fine. But then when I went to go change my password, it's like, enter your email, enter my email. It's like, there's no record of that email. It's like, what do you mean there's no record of that email? And that was as far as it can go. And I couldn't reset my password. And so I eventually got it straightened out by Twitter. But it's the exact same attack. So I almost wonder if I was part of a dry run of this.
Yeah, like a test.
Yeah. And so it was, that was kind of disturbing. So that happened. So all this is going on Wednesday. And then a lot of us were like, well, we don't know what was going on yet. So we all went and changed our passwords just in case, right? Which is a pretty legitimate position, I think. Turns out if you changed your password within the last 30 days, I would have been caught in this anyway because of my existing problem. And you had a verified account. Twitter basically locked down the accounts because they were concerned that this attack was happening and these accounts were all compromised. So they basically locked everybody down and you can't tweet and no one has access. So a lot of journalists and people with verified accounts are now locked out, myself included. As well as our Android Central and iMore accounts are also locked out. Now, Twitter has acknowledged this, and they said, yeah, we're trying to verify accounts again, and when we feel comfortable enough that we lock down our back end, we'll make this, fix everything. But man, there's like thousands of accounts right now that are locked out. Now, my bigger point about this isn't just really whining about not being on Twitter. It's more about how the biggest flaw in all security is people, right? So like it's one thing to brute force, and you can, I had 2FA in my account. I don't want to go into my security what I had. I'm just going to say after that last issue, my security in my account was ridiculous. Like, and there are different ways of like doing this, and it still didn't. It doesn't matter if the attack comes from the back end. If they had the tools, it doesn't matter what my email was. It doesn't matter what my phone number was. It doesn't matter if I had 2FA on, because I got an email that basically said, it was at 8:07 p.m. It was like, oh, you disabled 2FA. Like, you probably shouldn't do that, but okay, you turned it off. They sent me that email. I'm like, I didn't turn off 2FA. What are you talking about? Then they turned off 2FA. And then they swapped out my email. And so now I don't know if I was attacked again this time, or that was just the same behavior that of Twitter locking everything down. But that was the same experience. But I think the biggest surprise about this attack is not the Bitcoin scam. It was, this is all that happened. Like they had access to like, foreign leaders and dignitaries, and apparently they couldn't get Trump's Twitter.
Yeah, which I found weird, because I assume Trump's account is behind some special locked back end, right? It has to be, surely.
Because Trump's account in 2017 was briefly deleted.
Oh, that's right.
By a Twitter employee who was like quitting, which is still one of the funniest things I've ever heard. I know I don't want to get political here, but the account should have stayed deleted. But that started highlighting sort of the problems with Twitter, and it's this idea of social networks, right? Like, but I'm surprised they didn't try to do something worse. They could have like tried to start a war, or incite people to violence. And there are a lot of dumb people out there. I shared it with you in a private chat. Someone was like on Twitter, they're like, oh, Twitter put in a new feature. If you do hashtag protect my password and then type out your password, it automatically scrambles your password for you. And then he actually like tweeted, and he put all his password was all stars, so it looked like it. And he had at least 2 or 3 people tweet what looked like their passwords in the open. So there are a lot of dumb people out there. So this could have been so much worse, or they could have just trashed people's accounts, right? We don't know like if DMs, direct messages, were accessed, but they could have like. Could you imagine Bill Gates just start tweeting out porn?
or even worse, like things against vaccination and stuff. You know how he's like a target right now for anti-vaxxers. If he had tweeted out, oh yeah, by the way, you anti-vaxxers are right, that would have been, you would never have heard the end of it, even though it was a hack and whatnot. Those people would have grabbed onto that and never let go. It would have been terrible.
Yeah, I mean, this is the problem with social networks, right? It's also this idea that there's like, one of the funniest side effects of this was Apple has never tweeted from Twitter accounts. They have 0 tweets. Now, they do tweet in the sense that they run ads, but ads don't count apparently on Twitter when you have like a business account. So technically they've had 0 tweets, but they got hacked too with this. So they tweeted out the Bitcoin thing. Of course, they, got recontrol back, deleted the tweet, but now it says that they still have 1 tweet. Like there's this like they call it the scarlet letter of like this attack. So now the Apple account has a 1 on its thing, even though the tweet is technically deleted. I don't know. It's funny stuff, but it goes to show you that like, stuff is going to be really important for the election coming up, obviously. And this idea going forward of social networks in general, democracy and information and all this, it's a dangerous thing because there's so much. The way, President of the United States uses Twitter is a really good example. Like he literally declares policy before he even tells his own staff on Twitter. And like, there's so much influence of this stuff. It's so important. Now, granted, if Apple does something, it's not a big deal, but I don't know. This stuff is, we're heading into a really weird new world. And it goes to show you that the security aspect, I had to write an article talking about how for 2 weeks I filed a complaint with Twitter and I couldn't get back my account. And like, I have a verified account, and I still couldn't get a human to respond to me. Um, it goes to show you that Twitter itself is just like, I don't know. It's a weird time.
Yeah.
So
Well, what I found interesting is Twitter's temporary band-aid to stop the verified accounts from tweeting. They turned off tweeting access, I guess, to all verified accounts. So normal accounts could still tweet, but for about 2 hours on the day, verified accounts could no longer tweet. If you tried to tweet, it would just put an error, you can't tweet right now or whatever. But verified users could still retweet. So apparently there are accounts on Twitter where the account's just words, and you can scroll through the Twitter thing, and verified accounts were retweeting words, and if you scrolled up their timeline, they were spelling out sentences.
There was a Twitter account, I believe it's called Every Word.
Yeah.
And all they did was tweet out every word in the English dictionary. So what you could do was, and I ended up doing this because for a while, this was before I actually, got locked out, but my account was restricted. I could only retweet. So you would go to Every Word, do an advanced search, find the word you wanted. So I think I did like help me and then lame. And so I found those and I was able to retweet them, and you can kind of like send out codes. Yeah, it was kind of funny.
Yeah. And obviously everyone who's non-verified on Twitter were loving it. Like, yes, this is the best day ever. The verified can no longer tweet. Silence at last, stuff like that. It was honestly, I thought it was a pretty good day. Maybe not so much for Twitter, but for everyone else, it's great.
Well, it was possibly a dry run, or for what, like I said, there's a lot worse that could have happened and may still happen. I don't know. And I don't want to get all like negative, but man, when world's entering a pretty bad phase, and I'm not confident that in November it's going to be much better. So, anywho, that is the Twitter hack. But go get 2FA if you haven't. I actually, and I may do a review of this, I don't know, but I have this in front of me here. So this is actually Google Titan. Is that what it is? Yeah, Titan security key. This is sort of like, and there's the other one too. It's like YubiKey, I believe it's called. These are physical keys for locking down your social networks and two-factor authentication. So you need to actually plug this into a computer, or there's the Bluetooth version, which you just press a button and allows you to do the 2FA, but it's a physical key. So, and the reason why that's important is because of SIM swap attacks. So this actually happened to someone at is it ZDNet or CNET? I always mix those two up, but Matthew Miller. There's an attack where if you have 2FA and it goes to your phone, you get the text message code, but people can like steal your SIM and clone your SIM and then intercept your 2FA codes. So having a physical key is one way to get around that. But security is becoming like a really, really big deal these days, right? So,
yeah.
Anywho, let's move on to some other brighter topics like Surface Duo being pushed back. So put this into context, because technically Microsoft is just like, it's coming out in the holiday season. So we can't really say it's delayed.
And I didn't. In the tweet that I made about this, I did not use the word delayed, specifically because it's not delayed. Technically, this thing is still launching early. It's just launching later than the earliest schedule it was supposed to be. So the original plan was this one was supposed to come out around build in May. You were a limited launch in May, and developers and enthusiasts were supposed to be able to buy the Duo and be using it by now. That didn't happen, unfortunately. So the next sort of time in which they were hoping to get it out was this month. I was told back in June that the plan was that they were going to start sending it out to reviewers in early July, and it would start shipping to the public late July. Early July came and went, and we hadn't heard anything from PR about Surface Duo coming soon. So it was starting to look like this thing wasn't launching in July, and then I actually had it confirmed that, the schedule has changed. They've pushed it back a bit. It is still near. I'm told it should still be this summer, likely more September time than anything else. Now, I don't want to give it another box to fail at. I'm just sometime this summer. Could be August, could be September. But Microsoft is still trying very hard to get this out sooner rather than later, because, we all know the specs at this point. They're last year's specs. The longer they hold on to this thing, the less likely people are going to want to buy it come holiday 2020. Yeah, so I just wanted to give you an update on that because I know a lot of people are expecting it this month because I had foolishly said that it was coming hopefully this month. I should never have said that anyway. I should just
How
stuck
dare
to
you?
this summer because that's generalized and that's easier to get right than actually giving it a month. But sometime this summer is when we are still expecting Surface Duo. For those wondering where it is internally right now in regards to like the development of it, it's basically done. Factory OS image is complete. We're now at the production validation phase, which is when Microsoft is talking to the factories and says, all right, we want to manufacture 200 Surface Duos just to make sure you can do it. So they manufacture 200, then they make sure like the boxes are like the correctly sized, the shrink wrap is perfect, everything in the box fits as is intended, and then they test the devices and make sure the devices are actually working, that the failure rate is pretty low. If everything's all good to go with that, then they will ramp up production, and then that's when you can start pre-ordering and it starts shipping a few weeks after that. So I'm told this process doesn't take too long, maybe a few weeks, and I think it's been in production validation for a bit already. So we are getting there. Like I said, this delay, air quotes, isn't too much longer. It's just that it's not as soon as July, which is what we were kind of all hoping for, unfortunately.
In the meantime, Panos Panay of Microsoft and Brad Anderson of Microsoft and
everybody at Microsoft,
other people have been regularly and consistently sharing photos of them using the Duo, including a lot of them now are using the new bumper case, which we expect to be probably included in the box.
That's right, yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of evidence that this is really imminent for launching. I guess you should probably dispel. We're not expecting, because of the slight delay, that they added magically NFC.
The hardware is still the same hardware. The delay, I don't think, was anything to do with the hardware or software. I think it's more external factors at this point. Things like FCC approval, production validation, all of that stuff. They're now talking to the third parties to get this thing going. But all of the in-house stuff, I think, is good to go, more or less. So maybe they're still working on the day one update, but I don't think that's too far out at this point.
Got it. Well, hopefully we'll get it soon. I'm itching to get my hands on it. We've talked a lot about this on previous podcasts, so if you want to go back and listen to those on our thoughts, or you can see on our YouTube channel, Zach doing his walkthrough of what the software is going to be like and why it's kind of a big deal. So should be good. Hopefully we'll be hearing more soon, but it definitely feels pretty close. Of course, most people will probably want to sit out for the first gen, but you can sit on the sideline and watch how all of us...
You can watch us have fun with our duos.
yes. Yeah, should be good. All right, let's move on to Windows 10X. So on the tip of everybody's tongue here. So we did hear about how 10X was going to launch at the end of this year on the Surface Neo. So that's the bigger version of the dual screen device. And then Microsoft had a change of heart and they announced, we're not doing that right now. We're basically kicking that can down the road. That also means Lenovo's dual or foldable screen device is also, that was already announced as coming with Windows 10 Pro and then later getting 10X because they wanted to get that out the door. And that's still probably coming. Actually, we could talk about Lenovo's leak after. But now it seems like 10X, Microsoft said, listen, things have changed because of the pandemic and the way that people are working. So we want to focus putting on 10X into lower cost single screen devices. And so what's the status of that, Zach? What's going on with 10X?
So when Microsoft announced the pivot from dual screen to single screen, they didn't really explain what that meant for Windows 10X. They didn't describe any sort of changes in the market they expect 10X to be targeting or the feature set. They just said 10X, we built 10X to be adaptive and it's going to be launching on single screens first. They didn't even specify what kind of single screen PCs. Are we going to see it in like the next Dell XPS 15 or the next HP Spectre? So I've been digging around for information about what to expect with Windows 10X when it launches next year, which is they're hoping to launch it next year, for those wondering, in the first half of next year as well. So they do have a sort of time frame for what they hope to get these first Windows 10X devices out. And for a while, information regarding 10X was slow. There wasn't much movement going on in the builds internally and whatnot until the last couple of weeks. I don't know when exactly this change came into effect, but the technology Microsoft uses to virtualize Win32 programs on Windows 10X is gone in the latest Windows 10X builds. And I'm told this is no accident. Microsoft is planning to ship Windows 10X without Win32 support. Without local Win32 support, I should add. And we'll get to what that means in a second. Because When Microsoft pivoted Windows 10X from dual screen to single screen, they also pivoted the target market for it. Windows 10X, when it was announced, was this, inspirational platform for high-end premium foldable PCs. These devices were going to cost $2,000 and up and stuff. This wasn't going to be everyone's platform. This was going to be a limited, like a niche market that's very expensive to get into, and on form factors that most people probably don't think they need at the very beginning, at least. With the pivot to single screen, Microsoft isn't just making Windows 10X available on laptops and tablets. They're actually focusing Windows 10X on the low end of the market, low-cost PCs that are built for the education market and the enterprise market. Very, very similar to Chrome OS. So if you remember when we first started talking about Windows 10X back in the day, when it was codenamed Windows Lite and Santorini, we were talking about this thing as a Chrome OS competitor that just also happened to run on dual-screen foldable PCs as well. We've come full circle. Microsoft is going right back to that initial vision with Windows 10X, and it's now going to be launching as a web-based platform, more or less, but with UWP apps, of course, and without local Win32 emulation, is what I'm told. Regarding the dual screen stuff, I'm told that Microsoft still does want to do dual screen with Windows 10X. That is on their radar. They want to do it. The problem is with the current pandemic and the economy and stuff, they don't know when they can do it, because the reason Neo and stuff isn't coming this year is, one, it's not ready, but two, would the economy be able to handle it? Are people willing to buy experimental PCs at this time? The answer most likely is no. So the dual screen stuff, it's still on their radar. They still want to do it, and I am told Veil will probably be part of the dual screen stuff is still, because those will be more powerful PCs. One of the reasons why Veil isn't on the low-cost stuff is because Veil requires running a legacy version of Windows 10 behind the scenes, and on low-cost PCs with an Intel Pentium or an Intel Atom or even Intel Core M3 really, with say 4 gigs or 8 gigs of RAM, that can take a serious toll on the performance and battery life of those devices. So you pull Veil out, you no longer have that problem. You just have the web apps and the UWP apps. So Windows 10X...
And you get Windows RT again.
Right, but so here's the difference. You may have mentioned there that I mentioned specifically local apps. Microsoft is working on integrating Windows Virtual Desktop, or at least using the same technology that Windows Virtual Desktop uses. For those who don't know, Windows Virtual Desktop is a enterprise service that Microsoft has where enterprises can set up cloud installs of Windows 10, install programs to that cloud, and then have their employees or whoever have their own thin client at home, but then have those installed apps on the cloud just show up in the start menu as if they were native. So when you click on an app icon in the start menu that's actually installed on the cloud install, it will just be placed onto your desktop as if it were a native app. And I'm told Microsoft is working to integrate that into Windows 10X for these low-cost devices, so enterprises and... Sorry, go ahead.
I feel like the on South Park, the member berries. Remember when the Elite X3?
Yeah.
When you can put it into the desktop mode, connected to a larger display. We have a video about this. And then you could run streamed Win32 apps to it as a full computer. And what a wild early experience that was. It was very niche, but HP and I think they worked with Citrix on them. I'm not really sure. But it is that same theory. And that was kind of a dry run of that technology and that ability to, I guess, look into the future of what this stuff could be and how we can solve these problems of, say, ARM processors where people still occasionally do need this legacy app support. You toss in like 5G to that mix, and you have this ability of to have high, rate streaming everywhere. And something like doing that is, I don't know, but it just reminds me of the Elite X3. It's just crazy how far ahead conceptually that device was. But the market was just not ready. And it wasn't an amazing experience. It was more like a proof of concept and a neat novelty idea. But the seeds from that are still living on in today's products.
Yeah, so the cloud-based stuff. And it's funny because when I first heard about this, I was like, there's no way Microsoft is going to ship 10X without local Win32 support. That has to be part of it. If there's no Win32, it's not Windows, right? And we're back with Windows RT, as Dan said. Now, give me a second to find the article I'm looking for here. But I went back and read Panos Panos's blog post when he announced the pivot from dual screen to single screen. And once I learned about this whole, that they're pulling out the local stuff and it's going to be streaming apps for Win32. This sentence here, like this bit that he writes here, it stands out like a sore thumb. He goes, as we continue to put customer needs at the forefront, we need to focus on meeting customers where they are now. Our customers are leveraging the power of the cloud more than ever, and we believe the time is right to lean into this acceleration in a different way. With Windows 10 Next, we designed for flexibility, and that flexibility has enabled us to pivot our focus towards single-screen Windows 10 Next devices that leverage the power of the cloud to help customers work, learn, and play in new ways. He's talking about this. He's talking about using Windows Virtual Desktop or that technology to stream Win32 programs to Windows 10X, as well as focusing more on the web app aspect of Windows 10X. From the beginning, Windows 10X has been a lightweight platform designed for PWAs and UWPs. That's remaining. The difference is the local Win32 virtualization is apparently being pulled out, at least at launch. But the good news with that is, because Veil is gone from the launch products, it can technically run on ARM now. The reason it wasn't coming to ARM originally was because the Veil containers and whatnot, they couldn't emulate the emulation that was currently going on top of Windows 10X using an ARM processor. But now the Veil stuff is gone. That's no longer an issue. So I am told that we might actually see some Windows 10X ARM devices next year in this, like the Qualcomm Snapdragon 7C or perhaps even the 8C. I don't think we'll see an 8CX because, again, this is a sort of low-cost, low-end platform designed for the enterprise and education markets. I'm sure there'll be some consumer PCs, like the Surface Go 3 maybe, that you'll be able to buy with Windows 10X. But I don't know if there's a consumer version of Windows Virtual Desktop. I think consumers buying Windows 10X at launch will be people who use web apps and UWP apps, which I guess it works for Chrome OS, right? Chrome OS doesn't have Win32 programs. It has Android apps, but I don't think that's the selling point of Chrome OS. I think Chrome OS is good because it has access to the web and it has web apps. And Microsoft is leaning into this with Windows 10X.
Really the big deal about Chrome OS and why it's gained strength in the United States, right? So if you're in Europe right now, you're probably laughing, who uses Chromebooks, right? But in the US, it is a big deal. And the reason is because of schools. And the reason it's a big deal in schools is simply just due to low cost and IT management of the devices. They're very easy to reset. There's very few problems with them because it is a basic streamlined operating system that can't do what a Windows laptop can do. And we've talked about this in the past that, Windows 10 and S mode was a Band-Aid approach. That was Microsoft's trying to really make an aggressive attempt to hold on to and grow its market for schools and education. But it was never going to be the long-term solution. But we said that this is just a way to lock down Windows 10 for IT and for device management until this thing comes along. So I think between that market has become very lucrative, especially think of the pandemic right now. The only thing we're talking about in the United States right now is everyone wants to reopen the schools. But then a lot of us are like, you probably shouldn't reopen them right now. But then it's like, well, how do we get around this? Do we do a hybrid approach because the problem right now is it's like, well, kids should just learn from home, or temporarily at least. But the problem is that a lot of people still don't have computers for schools and can't participate. So if you think about those dynamics in the market, like there's a strong drive to have low cost, affordable devices that are easy to maintain for students. Microsoft is kind of there right now, but they're still struggling against Chrome and Chrome OS and Chromebooks. This idea of focusing on 10X to hit that market, go after it right now, I think this is a smart thing. Before, it was more like a novelty. It's like, well, we're going to launch it on high-end sort of dual screen devices for really cutting-edge people. And at different times, that was probably an okay thing to do. But I think right now, the way the world has shifted, and you throw in things like 5G and high-speed internet and the demands that people have, as well as now Apple getting involved on ARM, right? That's another big thing that's looming. I think this is probably a good approach. Plus, they can always scale up from
Yes.
later, so.
And I think as well with xCloud and stuff, xCloud has proven that you can do streaming in this way. Like people are playing games through streaming now, like games that are stored on Xboxes and PCs that they're playing on handheld devices thanks to the internet and streaming technology. They say if we can do it with video games, doing it with an app is a piece of cake because for the most part it's a static UI. Things are only moving around when either you're interacting with it or you're clicking on something, a window's popping up and whatnot. For the thing like in Office, for example, you could stream Office all day long. The internet, it wouldn't be a problem. And the good thing about app streaming as well is that before with Windows 10 X using Veil, you were limited to the processing power on your device. So if you were running, say, the Surface Neo, you had an Intel Lakefield, which apparently the first Gen 1 isn't the best, whatever. Running a Win32 program.
It just came out, too. We'll talk about that after.
Running a Win32 program, you're now using that underpowered processor to not only run the modern Windows 10X, but a legacy version of Windows 10 in addition to that to run this Win32 program. With app streaming, you can have that same program installed somewhere in the cloud on an Intel Core i5 or an i7 or even an i9, whatever, the most powerful PC you can build or configure, I guess, using Windows Virtual Desktop.
Threadripper!
And stream it from there. So then you can be like crunching data or rendering video on your Surface Neo or like a thin client, which has an Intel Atom in it, and it doesn't matter because as long as you've got the internet connection, you can do whatever you need to do in Virtual Desktop, and then you can have the local apps, Microsoft Edge, web apps, UWP apps to do things on device. So yeah, I do. This is an interesting change for Windows 10X, and it is one Microsoft hasn't talked about yet. They did tell us when they did announce the pivot that they would be talking more about 10X later this summer / in the fall. I got bored of waiting, so here I am telling you this now. Perhaps Microsoft will detail this soon. But again, the Veil stuff I am told will probably still be around on the dual screen stuff, on the higher end stuff. Devices that can do the virtualization on device likely will be able to. It's just this initial launch with the low cost education enterprise market focus where Veil will not be part of the product. And I think that's a big deal, if I'm honest.
And there's also hedging their bets, right? So this idea of like having Veil in the first place and like emulating Win32 is conceptually for people who haven't shifted from a web-based computing experience and need more than what UWP can do. And that's a large segment of people, but there's also people like you and me. I mean, we use Windows 10 on ARM devices, which have these sort of limitations and are totally fine. But the world is clearly changing, moving towards, cloud computing, localized, light apps and operating systems. And you throw in high-speed internet to that, like there is going to be a pivot point where people are like, I don't really need to run Photoshop if I can run like a cloud-based version of something. And so that change may happen while Microsoft is spending all this effort to get Veil out, and in which case it may not even be that big of a deal. I think, of course, there'll always be people who sort of need that technology, but I think that percentage is going to start to go down.
Yeah. So this does sound like a big deal, but I honestly, for the market which Microsoft is targeting with 10X at launch, I don't think it's a huge deal because the enterprises, if they do want those Win32 programs, will be able to set up Windows Virtual Desktop, as will the education establishments that are buying Windows 10X devices in bulk. That they all have the setups and the subscriptions required to set that sort of stuff up so they can have things like legacy Office or legacy Photoshop, whatever, running on these devices. Because they will look native, just like the Veil stuff was. They will show up in the start menu, you click on it, it doesn't like bring you to a remote desktop of the legacy taskbar and stuff. It will just place the legacy app on the Windows 10X desktop as if it were a native app and stuff. It would just require your internet connection to function, which I think especially in this day and age, in markets where I think 10X is targeting most, internet is more or less everywhere. The US, the UK, I think the internet issue won't be a huge deal, but we'll have to wait and see how this goes and stuff. I'm still excited for 10X. I'm told the feature set isn't changing much apart from the Veil stuff being removed. The UI will still be the same more or less. The delay is simply just to make sure it works when it launches. I am told first half of 2021, which should mean that they want it done by December, because right now we're in the July to December development phase internally. And if they want 21H1 is technically the first half of 2021, so that has to be done by December, and we'll see if they can keep to that.
Someone's asking sort of a broad question, but we'll just talk about briefly, which is why does Microsoft always seem to be trying to make a mini version of Windows?
Because
Whether it's Windows Mobile,
is crap.
Windows CE, Windows RT, Windows 10 in S mode, now Windows 10X. Yeah, I mean, this is something we've always talked about. Windows it's a double-edged sword. It's one of the most powerful operating systems that can do anything. You can run apps from 30 years ago on it. You can run the most modern stuff. It's a very flexible, powerful operating system that's more friendly to use than Linux. On the other hand, it's an operating system that the fundamentals of it, was built like 10, 20, 30 years ago. And the world has changed. We're a much more mobile world right now. So you have things like iOS and Chrome OS who have come onto the scene, and people don't necessarily meet what all the baggage that Windows brings. But there's also a lot of people in enterprise and schools and hospitals and government that do need that feature. So Microsoft is always caught between this. They want to go into this future and build this light operating system, but then you have a lot of people, including a lot of you in our own audience, who are like, no, and they flip tables. I need 64-bit support. I need 32. I need to run that app from 1994 still on my modern PC. I want everything, but I also need it to be as fast and as awesome as iOS. It's like you can't. It's hard to really do all of that. So that's why you're always seeing this effort. And the fact is, the world is changing. And I've wrote an article about this, about computing. We're getting, really powerful laptops like the XPS 15, XPS 17, Surface Book. And then we're going to this other extreme, which is something like the Flex 5G, which we'll talk about a little bit later, running Windows on ARM. And that's the world. It's going to these different models of computing. And then you throw in things like Surface Duo and Neo. And it's a fun time, but they need to have an operating system that can adjust to all this stuff. So.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm still excited for 10X. Like, as far as I'm aware, Veil isn't dead. It's still part of 10X. Like, since 10X is based on Windows Core, we've talked about this before. It's a modular OS. They can just pull out Veil quickly and easily, like with little to no effort. But they can also add it back whenever they need to. So they can actually add it back on certain devices, as I'm hearing it will be the case with these dual screen foldable PCs. But I mean, if you tried Veil in the emulator, it's not great. Now, granted, it is an emulator and it is an early build. I am told Veil did come. It wasn't too bad on native hardware like a Surface Pro and stuff, but on the low end stuff, it's just not as good. And I think that's why Microsoft is leaning into the Rail side, which Rail is remote version of Veil. I think we'll see that take off there. Like, it is going to be interesting from a consumer standpoint, because obviously consumers don't really have access to Windows Virtual Desktop, because that's an enterprise thing. I wonder, and this is entirely speculation, I've not been told this is just an idea that I've come up with in my own head. I wonder if at one point Microsoft will sort of turn OneDrive into a cloud storage solution for programs as well. Your OneDrive becomes a VM with legacy Windows in it. You can't access that VM, but you can install legacy programs to it. And on 10X or even Windows 10, wherever you are, no matter what device you're using, a thin client, a big heavy PC, it doesn't matter. In your start menu, the programs you've installed to your OneDrive show up as native apps. You click on it, and it connects to your VM in OneDrive and stuff. But then it's the app running like that. I do wonder if Microsoft may do something like that one day, assuming internet connections are improved and whatnot. I think this could be a viable option for consumers if Microsoft did something like that. But again, I've not heard that's the plan and whatnot. That's just an idea that I came up with. And if Microsoft, you're not working on that, there's a free idea for you. Thank you. You can thank me later.
I think it's safe to assume we've seen things internally that what Microsoft and others have referred to as ambient computing is a thing that's on their roadmap. This idea is that eventually in the future, we just have basically screens and displays that are connected to the internet, but the operating system itself can be streamed or only needs like a localized firmware to run something. And they are obviously conceptually thinking about putting operating systems in the cloud. And there's a lot of limitations to that right now. A lot of people will be like, well, internet isn't reliable. It's still too expensive. It's not fast enough. But those are things that are going to be solved. Like, I can't imagine in 30 years, assuming we don't have an apocalypse, internet's going to be just even more ubiquitous, even more faster, probably on 6G, of course. So like these are solvable problems. And if you think that's crazy, like I still remember in the early 90s when the internet first came out, like computers were cool for playing video games, but you couldn't do much with them. What made a computer really interesting was as soon as you can connect up to the internet. And it's not like the internet was like this thing that existed and there was tons to do. There was barely anything. If you remember Gopher, FTP, news groups, like that was what the internet was. Like I remember using the internet before there was the World Wide Web. And all those things had to come out and, it made being connected a lot more interesting. And then even then, it was all dial-up modems. No one had like a dedicated connection until that eventually came out. So this idea of like we keep moving to this more and more connected world, where now even our smartwatches have LTE, right? So it's just going to continue down that path, and that's what really gets exciting. Of course, it also means sure, if you lose internet, everything becomes useless. Everyone who has an Xbox knows this. If your Xbox Live goes down, try launching Netflix, right?
Yeah.
It becomes so there is that problem, but that is also, there's a lot of benefits to having this sort of always connected world.
It's also worth mentioning with Windows 10X, the pivot to single screen doesn't mean we will see it on premium tablets and laptops. Unfortunately, at least as far as I'm aware, what I've been told is 10X will be for the low end stuff, and OEMs won't be shipping the next XPS or a variant of the HP Spectre with Windows 10X. Those will be still Windows 10 Home or Pro devices, legacy Windows 10. And this is why Microsoft is also bringing over Windows 10X innovations, as they have said to us, to legacy Windows 10, because there is still that differentiation. Windows 10X is for the low end and the high end foldable stuff. Everything between that is still legacy Windows 10, and that's what they are targeting because that has the most market share, 1 billion users. And Windows 10X is great in its own right, but a lot of that technology can be applied to legacy Windows 10 as well. So that's why they're bringing it over, because they're not trying to eat into the sort of general market of Windows. That's still going to be legacy Windows. And right now, and earlier this year, we've talked about this before on previous episodes, Microsoft has reinvested in legacy Windows 10 quite a fair bit. So much so that I am actually told, multiple sources have told me that this sort of redesign that was kind of expecting is in the works. They are actually actively working on a redesign of Windows 10. Now, it's not a major redesign. It's still going to be legacy Windows 10, but we're expecting to see things like rounded corners, more of those new icons, perhaps the updated Action Center. The start menu, I believe, will be remaining as is. Microsoft, for some reason, has resuscitated live tiles. Not to say that they're adding new features to live tiles, but they're not getting rid of them now. I guess there was some mandate internally which said, no, these are staying. So, they're sticking around and stuff. But we're also expecting app update. If you go and take a look at Panos Panay's 1 billion video that he posted, just take a look at that. Most of the designs in that video are stuff that they're actively pursuing internally. The problem, of course, is how long will this take to actually show up in builds and start shipping in a release? It could be 2 years. We don't know. Microsoft doesn't know either internally, I don't think. They're trying to get a lot of it out with this current wave internally, which would, I guess, end up being 21H1 or 21H2. But that could extend into 2022 easily. So we'll just have to wait to see. But they are working on it. Microsoft is reinvested in legacy Windows 10, which is annoying for Windows 10X because now it gets this. You get the low-end stuff and this foldable stuff, which may or may not launch in the future.
And all I care about is having a light version of Windows for my Windows 10 on ARM devices.
Yeah, I would love to see Surface Go with ARM with Windows 10X. That's my dream device right there. I just want that.
Yeah, same. Before we get to, we'll actually talk about Windows 10 and ARM. Let's talk about xCloud, some news around that this week. So some more details. Project xCloud is still the code name, so it won't be called that, but we do now know it's coming in September to select markets. Unfortunately, we don't know what those select markets are. Safe to presume United States, probably UK, Canada, the major sort of Western markets. Sorry. But Microsoft will give more details, presumably, as we get closer to its announcement. We also now know it's going to be part of the Ultimate tier for Xbox, their Game Pass, the Ultimate Game Pass, which covers PC and Xbox. So it won't be an extra cost if you're part of that tier, but it just adds more value to that tier for Game Pass, which is done really well for Microsoft. It's a recurring source of revenue. A lot of people bought into it. It's been an area of growth, and this just makes it even better. So as far as I know, that was most of the major news around xCloud. We are still expecting it for PC around that time too, of course, September. We have heard internally there's been some shifts around that. I'm curious if it'll run on ARM. It runs on ARM now because it's a separate app. They may be putting it back into the other app, the Game Pass app, which doesn't run on ARM. The new Xbox Game Pass app that's like in beta right now doesn't run on ARM, which is really annoying. So like, again, that gets into like in Panos and Windows team, if you're listening, this is the kind of crap you got to figure out, because you can't release something like redo your Game Pass app. And, basically the Xbox team is kind of breaking off from the store and doing their own thing, which, hey, good for them. Like they should, but like, I just, you can't build this using old Win32 technology and Electron or whatever they were using for a while. If it can't run on ARM, because ARM is sort of like, this solves a lot of problems for ARM devices who can't, game, right? But if they don't have that support out there, like it really just takes sort of these, I don't know, the punch out of having Windows 10 and ARM, because then you can be like, yeah, they can't game locally, and you can't even stream on them because Microsoft couldn't build their app to support ARM. I hope that's not the case. Right now, you can, there was the leaked version, and you can stream on ARM. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see about that. Yeah, it's React Native now. I still don't know why they can't get it to run on ARM. But come on, Microsoft. Microsoft can't be building new products that don't support these new chipsets. Like, that's the dumbest thing ever.
I mean, I think they can do it. I think it's just an oversight at this point, right?
Right.
I don't see why there's a technical limitation.
Right, exactly. I'm saying this is more about just the internal screwed up messaging that Microsoft always has, which is, do this one thing, everybody should do this, and then it's like they don't do it themselves.
Yeah, there really should be like a set of rules internally. If you're Microsoft and you're building a Microsoft app for Windows, it should be compatible with x86, x64, and ARM. That should just be the minimum. Just like how it's usually x86, 64. Just make ARM a requirement. If you're shipping an app that doesn't support ARM, then you can't ship it, right? That should just be the rule internally, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I mean, Microsoft Teams, right?
Yeah.
A productivity business application, part of Office, and it doesn't run natively fully on, Windows 10 and ARM. It can run, it's not optimized. Why? We understood, like, the team that build Teams, it was a small group, and they were like this little sort of like, they kind of came out there, put this thing together quickly, as fast as they could, and I kind of get all that, but it's like, How are you trying to sell Windows 10 and ARM as a business thing, and you're not even making your core app experience native on it? That's something Apple would never, ever do. And that's like a lesson where I'm still, this is just mismanagement. It's the fact that these teams get to operate independently and do what's best for them, which I get, but then they're not responsible or have to answer to any bigger vision that the company is technically putting out there for computing. And to me, that's just, when people criticize Microsoft, that's exactly it,
Yeah.
So speaking of ARM, let's talk about the Flex 5G, which, my God, I say my God because it's running on my floor right now. I've been doing a battery rundown test. So there's a couple of ways I evaluate products when I do laptop reviews. There's the, how do I feel in terms of battery life? Like, I'll sit down for 5 hours and just use it. And you can see after 5 hours, if you're like down to 50%, if you've been using it for 5 hours straight, you can be like, well, it's probably around 10 hours then, right? Of usage. And I used to do this, especially when I would go down to New York City. I would hop on the train for like 4 hours and just be on the computer the whole time using Wi-Fi for, brightly lit environment. And I was able to get kind of battery estimates. That's one way to do it. I would also do the battery rundown report, which is a feature built into Windows, where you run a little. I have a tutorial in Windows Central, but it's using the command prompt, and you put this in there. And it basically, Windows has a diagnostic that's always running. It's keeping track of your battery. And so I would run that, and that gives you estimates too. So I put that there, like, okay, sometimes that would match with what you feel like it is, and other times it could be, not. It's a little bit more dynamic. Then there's the third way, which is running a synthetic battery test, which is, there's different ways. There's a lot of companies would just run a looping video, right? And that's where you always get these like 24 hours of battery life. It's because they ran like a video, and that's fine. That is one way to look at, battery life. But Intel chips and ARM processors are really optimized for streaming video. And it's not fair to compare it to, say, web browsing or using Office. So like I use PC Mark 10, and they have a battery rundown test when they have one called Applications, which is used on ARM. And what it does is it launches Office, Excel, Word, and it loops through them and then runs like, pretend it's like word processing, it's running things. It jumps on the web, it uses video conferencing, and then it takes little breaks in between while it's doing these little things to simulate like idle time. And it just does that. And you can argue it's definitely more realistic than just running a video test, right? But you can still argue it's not perfect. But the benefit to it is it's consistent. As long as you're setting the display brightness to, basically even with other devices, you can get actually like a real comparison. So I bring this all up because I've been running this battery test on the Flex 5G. I started at I think 9 o'clock last night. It's still running. So that's 3 p.m. the next day. And it's still got hours left on it. This thing is probably going to be 20 hours, which again, might not mean anything, but comparatively, that's probably about twice the battery length of like what the Galaxy Book S got. So on average, the Flex 5G for myself is getting at least 12 hours of real world battery usage. Like I can confidently say that's what I'm getting. And it reflects also in the battery report. I think if you put brightness to 100% and use like 5G and everything, or just use it for LTE all the time and really just push the processor, I think the minimum you'll ever get out of this thing is 9 hours. Like I'm just really pushing it hard, right? But I think a lot of people are going to get at least 12 hours. And I think you can probably go to 15 or 16 hours if you control for other things. So the battery life on this laptop, now available through Verizon, now available through Lenovo directly in the United States, coming elsewhere in the world too, is very good. And it's partly because this thing has a 60 watt hour battery, which is why it also weighs 3 pounds, which, it's not light for a Windows ARM device. But at least that extra weight is because it's got a 60 watt hour battery, which is much larger than Surface Pro X, which only has a 38 watt hour. Toss in full HD display and all that kind of stuff. So this device is pretty crazy. It's also very good for performance. It actually does better for performance than the Surface Pro X does. It's one of the fastest ARM devices I've ever run. And it just runs. So it's a great productivity laptop, right? It's got a pretty good keyboard, a little bit shallow. Michael Fisher, Mr. Mobile, had some issues missing keystrokes. I haven't seen that, but I could see it's a shallow keyboard. It's not as shallow as a Galaxy Book S, but it is shallow. Top firing speakers, full HD, 14-inch display. So it's a larger display this time around versus the Yoga C630. It's a very good productivity laptop. But, so this is a preview of the review that's coming out. I only gave it like 3.5 out of 5 stars. Because I really like it. It's a really good laptop. It actually surprised me. And I mentioned this on the last podcast. I was actually I liked it better than I thought I would. But there is the 5G tax, right? So Qualcomm just charges more for having 5G today because they invested millions of dollars to make 5G happen. So they got to recoup costs. And one way they do that is they pass it on to consumers. And that's the same thing with 5G smartphones are more expensive, right? So there is a tax for that. And whether or not it's worth it to you is a personal decision. For most people, the answer is obviously no, right? I have to still drive an hour just to get to a 5G market to test this thing. And I live in a pretty big state, right? So it's like 5G is clearly very early days right now. So for most people, it won't be worth it. But for people who have disposable income, want the latest and greatest, who quote unquote need 5G, 5G makes way more sense in a laptop than a phone, I think, because you put the laptop down, you're going to get a more stable connection, but you can do things like video conferencing and trading large files. Like it makes more sense a little bit on a computer. So for some people, this, makes a big deal. And $1,400, not cheap, but HP Dragonfly, there's a 5G version coming of that laptop up later this summer. You also have the Latitude 9510 new 2-in-1, which I actually have here. It doesn't have 5G though. That too is coming later. So you can get 5G in your Intel laptops, but two things. One, those are going to be way more expensive, actually. I don't expect you to be able to buy a Dragonfly with 5G for less than $1,800. I'd be surprised. The Dragonfly is not a cheap laptop, right? And the Latitude 9510 is also not cheap. It goes up into the 2000 range easily. I don't know if the battery life will be as good. But so, as far as 5G laptops go, the Flex 5G may actually be the most affordable for the time being until 5G prices come down, which probably won't happen until 2021, 2022, when it becomes more mainstream. But my issues with this laptop are a few. One, has a weird bug. When it goes below 20% battery life, whether or not you're plugged in or not, the CPU single core score plummets for some reason, and you can feel it. Like it actually becomes super sluggish. There's some kind of bug that's going on here where it's kicking in some sort of what sounds like a battery saver, but battery saver shouldn't work when you're plugged in and below 20%. I don't know what, now this battery life is so long, I'm rarely ever getting below 20% anyway, but when it happens, it's annoying, right? So that's solvable though. That sounds to me like a bug. The laptop also never hibernates, which is a pro and a con. So like for people, the benefit of Windows on ARM is it's like a smartphone. It's always just on. You hit the power button, boom, it's on. But technically, it does run Windows, and those devices can hibernate. The Surface Pro X does hibernate after, I believe it's 5 hours of not being used. But you can configure that. You can actually go change the time. But it goes into hibernate. It shuts down into a very low power state. I believe it's called S0. And then when you hit the power button, it actually will resume, and it takes a little bit longer to kick back in. The benefit is it's if you don't touch that device for a couple of days, the battery life doesn't deplete. This laptop literally never sleeps or hibernates. It's always on until you close that lid. And even when you close that lid, it's still technically in that standby state. So the good news is that you never have to wait for it to turn on. It's always there. The bad news is if you put it down, you don't use it for 2 days, the battery will be dead because it'll just be used in the back, just like a smartphone. Just like if you don't charge your smartphone for a few days and just leave it there, it'll go dead after 2 to 3 days. Same thing with this. Is that a pro or con? I don't know. But you can't even configure the hibernate, which is pretty weird. Like it's a first ARM device I've seen that doesn't have that ability. Also, this laptop, as far as I can tell, and I'm waiting to confirm this with Lenovo, doesn't support inking, which it's a convertible laptop. It flips around, becomes a tablet. The Yoga C630, its predecessor, did support inking. As far as I can tell, this one does not. That's weird. I've never seen a convertible laptop that doesn't support inking. It's got a touch screen, doesn't support pen. I don't know why. I imagine to keep costs down, maybe to keep weight down. I don't know. But that's kind of a bummer if you are a person who likes this device for possibly for inking. So just some kind of weird things. It's also got a super glossy display. If you've heard this podcast, I hate glossy displays. I think it's more pertinent for a laptop that supposedly you can take anywhere in the world outside, use it in a cafe, on the streets, get 5G everywhere, right? Like you can make the argument of glossy display for like a 17-inch laptop isn't a big deal because you're probably not taking it outdoors anyway. But for this device, I feel like why could they just put an anti-reflective layer? I'm not talking about a matte display, but anti-reflective. Like you can do that. You can put an anti-reflective layer on this, and you won't get that reflectivity, because that reflectivity kills the ability to see things on the screen. It's bad for your eyes because your eyes are darting around constantly. Like this is a solvable thing. It blows my mind that not only do they not do that, but this is arguably one of the most glossy displays I've seen. It's just bizarre. So I'm mixed on this laptop. I enjoy using it. It's fast. I can do whatever I need to on it. Very good battery life on it. You can get 4G, you can get 5G on it. It's carrier unlocked. I know it's being sold with Verizon, but you can drop any SIM into this and you can get 5G. It does millimeter wave as well as sub-6. It does all that stuff. It's so in that sense, it's great, but it is disappointing in some ways too. Like it could be so much better, right? If the thing below 20% wasn't there, if it didn't have a glossy display, if it supported inking, like I don't know. So that's my thoughts on the Flex 5G. But I really like it. I'm probably going to end up just kind of using it as my regular device. I do like the Pro X. You know, there's pros and cons to both of them. So
would you like the Pro X if they just made it thicker and added more battery?
You know, the battery life on the Pro X is a good point. Like, no one's ever going to say, that's enough battery for me. That's too much. I don't need 12 hours, right? No one's ever going to say that. Unless it's like, we can make the laptop 5 pounds and give you 12 hours, right? You know, that's obviously the trade-off. But there's no such thing as too much. But the Pro X's battery, and I wrote this in the review, it's just enough. It's 7 to 8 hours of like hardcore regular usage, which is basically all day. For me, it's fine. So I really like the form factor. And it's got a higher resolution display too, and it supports inking at a really good level, and it has very good speakers. So the Pro X still definitely has some advantages to it. But again, the Pro X glossy display. One of the reasons I like the Pro X so much is because I put an anti-reflective layer on top of it. Now I actually really like it. But, you know, it would be cool to have 5G. So I don't know. And Flex 5G has a headphone jack. The Surface Pro X does not. There's some weird things, you know. So, but at least there's a differentiators between these devices. Like you can look at the Pro X and be like, that's very different from the Flex 5G. Same ballpark for pricing. Flex 5G is a little bit more expensive, but still same range. But they're very different devices, and it depends on what you prioritize. Like the inking thing, I think is a negative, but some people are going to be like, I wasn't buying this thing for inking. I have no intentions. I don't care about a pen. Even with me with the Pro X, like one of the reasons I like the inking so much is because the pen is hidden now. It's more like in that rare situation, I can use the pen, but otherwise I don't, most of the time I don't really care about inking, but for some people, you know, well, So that is the Flex 5G. Look for that review coming up probably Tuesday, but that's a sneak peek of it. So it's a fun laptop. I think for some people it's going to be very good, but Lenovo can still do a little bit better here. So,
shall we talk about the build that came out this week?
You can do that.
Too much in it, but that's fine. So they updated some more sound setting stuff. They're still working on their long, very half a decade journey now of bringing Control Panel into the modern settings app. But they're on their way. They've added some more sound settings in there, which is fun. They've also updated the modern settings icon to the colourful one that was first introduced on Windows 10X, which is nice. They're also testing some improved search UI, which I don't actually think is part of the build that they released. I think it's just a cloud side change. But for some reason, it's in the changelog for build 2170. And then there's a bunch of fixes and whatnot. So again, nothing too interesting happening in this week's build, but that new icon is, again, more sign. Why am I out of focus on the live stream? That more sign that, yes, Microsoft is working on UI stuff for Windows 10 right now, which is super fun. Also in this changelog is mention of Microsoft Launcher v6, which is interesting. For some reason, again, not related to the build at all, but we'll talk about it anyway. Microsoft Launcher v6 is now available to the public, and it's looking pretty good. This is the Microsoft launcher Microsoft has built and will be running on Surface Duo as well, but you can also run it on your existing smartphone. And it's essentially a rebuild from the ground up with improved performance, a better dark theme, customizable icons, a new landscape mode, and whatnot. So yeah, it's looking nice. You should definitely give it a go. It supports Android version 7.0 or higher, and you can get it through the Google Play Store today. Even if you're in beta or in the production ring or whatever, it will work. It will install and it's fine. I really do like the new Microsoft launcher. It is really nice. Yeah. It's very. I like the UI.
And it's been in
very
preview
clean.
For like 6 months now.
Yeah,
I think
it went in January. Yeah.
Yeah, so a lot of us have been running it. It's not really new. I've been running it my Galaxy Z Flip forever. And I do prefer it. It is faster. It's got some really nice. It looks a little bit better. yeah, they did a nice job with it. So.
And it rolling out to the public is just more proof that the Surface Duo is nearly done.
Right.
We're now at a shipping version of the device, of the launcher, which again is the launcher that ships on Surface Duo. If it's shipping publicly now to the world, then it's also done for Surface Duo. So that's good to see as well.
And speaking of laptops, small announcement came out today. So speaking of the Samsung Galaxy Book S, which is a Windows 10 and ARM device I reviewed a few months ago, really nice laptop, but very specific, right? It's a clamshell laptop, touch display, but not a convertible, very thin, right? Samsung wanted to create a 2.1 pound, super light, ultra convertible, or sorry, ultralight laptop, and they succeeded. It gets pretty good battery life on it. Keyboard is shallow, but the audio is good. Like, it's a fun laptop. So that laptop is $999. It's just 4G LTE, but it is $400 cheaper than the Lenovo Flex 5G, which I was just talking about. Samsung had announced that they're also going to be doing an Intel version of that laptop. It is now available. And it's interesting because that one runs Intel Lakefield. It's the first, as far as I know, first Lakefield consumer product on the market. So Lakefield is interesting because that's the next gen stuff. This is their 10 nanometer chip, uses 7 watts of power. So it's kind of comparable to what the Y series was a couple of years ago, but it has more cores. I believe it has 5 cores now, whereas the old one had 2 cores. And that thing would get crushed, even by ARM. The Snapdragon 8CX would destroy a Core i7 Y series processor, partly because it was only dual core. So this is Intel's attempt to sort of challenge ARM. So it's 7 watts of power, 5 cores. It uses the big little setup that Qualcomm mastered, which is you have a couple cores dedicated to pure performance, and then smaller cores run in the background, handle background tasks. So that is now available. What makes it interesting, the Qualcomm version is $999, say $1,000. This Intel version is $950. It's like, ooh, it's $50 cheaper. Plus, you're not going to get the problems with ARM not being able to run 64-bit. But they're calling this the Galaxy Book S Wi-Fi version, because obviously it has Wi-Fi. It's a PC, but it does not have LTE built into it. So that's why it's $50 cheaper. One way they're able to do that. So you're not going to get 4G LTE built into it. So how good is it? I don't know. I've never tried Lakefield. I've asked Samsung, are they going to do review units? They, of course, have not replied because Samsung PR is not the best. Hopefully, though, we can get our hands on it at some point. But I'm curious to see the performance of it. I don't know, if it's going to be that much better than ARM in terms of performance, or battery life, right? I'm not sure it's going to be much better, but who knows? It's something we have to kind of test to see how it's going to perform. And Samsung wanted the Book S back, so I don't even have the ARM version to directly compare it to. So I'll have to do, the benchmarks we already have for that review. But, the Intel ARM thing, it's kind of going to go back and forth. But at least there's a distinction now between these two devices. You get one with the 4G LTE or one without. And for some people, some people are going to be, I don't need LTE. It's fine. I don't need it instant on all the time or like really long battery life. Give me a 2.1 pound Intel based laptop. That's fine with Wi-Fi. So, but you can go check that out now, available for $950 through Samsung. So
nice.
Whew. And I think that about does it for this podcast because I'm getting tired. We're just over an hour and 11 minutes. I did post also briefly this week on Instagram. I have the HP Envy X360 in. It's one of the first LTE laptops that only costs like $700. I think it's a little bit less than $700, which is crazy. So HP is definitely pushing down on that technology, try to get it into more people's hands. I'll be reviewing that soon. It's a pretty good laptop, though, especially for the price. Still have the XPS 17 to review. I have the Razer Blade Pro 17, which I haven't even opened yet. And the Dell Latitude 9510 is here. And I think I have another Dell. I don't even know what it is. It's just on my floor. I haven't opened the box. So plenty of laptops to review. So pay attention to Windows Essential for that. But Zach, you got anything you want to promote?
So I'll probably be doing a write-up of the 10X news we spoke about in this podcast. If you're somebody who writes about Microsoft stuff for a living, just wait for that article because I think there'll be a little more information in it. That should be coming Monday, or maybe even the weekend. We'll see how urgent it is. But yeah, that will be coming next week. I'm also planning to do, hopefully, a new build video next week if the build is interesting enough. Microsoft, I'm counting on you, please.
So someone's asked about the Neo was supposed to launch with Lakefield, but also have LTE. Yes, on the Lakefield. The LTE thing was a little bit mixed. At the time, I believe I asked, and they said it wasn't going to have LTE. But I want to make clear, there's no technical limitation why this Galaxy Book S with Intel's Lakefield can't have LTE. If they wanted it to, they could have put in a modem and would have been fine. Probably not as good battery life, but they could have done that. It's technically feasible. They didn't because I think the price would have gone up and been higher than ARM. Which might not have been a bad option, but they decided to keep these sort of separate, right? One is a LTE, one's just Wi-Fi. Which one do you want? I think it makes it a little bit clearer, but Lakefield can do LTE if they want to, but it's an option. So that's that. All right, let's do some questions and answers. If you guys want to talk a little bit more about Lakefield, you can put those questions in there. If you're listening to this recorded, of course, you don't get to hear the question and answer period. I'm sorry about that, but you can always join us Fridays, 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time, YouTube, Windows Central, where we have a live chat going on, and you can watch our videos. Otherwise, you can ping us on Twitter. Maybe we'll respond. You can follow me at Daniel_Rubino, Rubino, and follow Zach at ZACBOWDEN. And of course, you can follow our work at windowscentral.com. We'll be posting all our reviews and info there. As always, though, thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk to you next time. Take care, everyone.
Fun.
Was it? Was it really?
Oh yeah, I didn't mention that the build this week was limited to Intel only. Oh well. Oh well.
Oh well.
Do you think xCloud will be sold separately for Xbox Live Gold members? It's part of Xbox Game Pass Ultimate, so you need to subscribe to that to get it.
Yeah, I don't know if it'll be separate. I don't think so, but who knows? Will GameCore unify Xbox and PC gaming?
From a development standpoint, yeah.
Yeah, it's an attempt to sort of bridge those two things and make it easier for developers to make a game to target both platforms. It's like a UWP, but for gaming. Is it going to be 100%, no code changes between PC and Xbox? Probably not, but it doesn't need to, right? It needs to basically, as much as they can be redundant between the two platforms.
Zach, you mentioned AT&T may carry the Duo. Will the Duo have GSM or CDMA band? I don't know. Oh, is AT&T both?
No, so I doubt very much it has CDMA.
Yeah,
CDMA is basically dead in the United States. It's going to be GSM. AT&T is GSM. T-Mobile is GSM. Verizon and Sprint were CDMA, but both have switched over to GSM for LTE. And you can basically run Verizon on just LTE as far as I know, and GSM. So, and then Sprint was bought by T-Mobile, so it's going to be folded anyway into that company. So I doubt this thing will support CDMA. CDMA is just not something we talk about much anymore. So. What about local streaming from Xbox? Is Game Pass required for that as well? I don't know. I don't think so, but I don't know. How will does Surface Pro X perform on Stadia? I think it's fine, but I haven't tried. I haven't tried Stadia at all. So, but it can handle game streaming totally fine. Like the Pro X has a really powerful GPU actually in it. I know some people find that hard to believe, but it actually really does. It's just whether or not everything can leverage it, but it can do quite a bit actually.
On the topic of Windows 10 X, I'm really curious how they are going to charge customers, since VMs that run these x86 apps can be quite expensive depending on the size. Well, I don't think it'll be a consumer thing. I think this will be an enterprise education thing, where the company that's issuing this, or the enterprise establishment that's issuing this, pays for that and sets that up. Consumers probably won't be using this app streaming unless Microsoft is working on some sort of consumer variant of that, which uses OneDrive and stuff. That could be possible. I don't know. That's not something I've been told. But as far as I'm aware, customers won't be streaming apps. They will be just using consumers won't be streaming apps. They'll just be using the web apps and whatever else, and UWP.
Could the new 7-watt Intel Lakefield show up in Surface Go 3? It definitely could, but understand what about Lakefield, as far as we know, I mean, the chip is $280 still. So if you go to Intel's site, you can look it up. That's the suggested price, of course, meaning that a company like Microsoft could get a lower, better deal when buying in bulk, right? But comparatively to a Core processor, a Core i5, it's not any cheaper, right? So Intel is not charging a bargain price for this chip. And that's always the problem with Intel, is you're getting kind of less performance, 7 watts of power instead of 15, but they're still charging you a lot for the architecture of the chip itself. So while they could put it in Surface Go 3, you still get into the problem of like the pricing, because it would be as expensive as the Core M3, but probably even more, because the Core M3 that's being used now is an old chip. I think it's one reason why they're using it. Intel was like, well, we got a bunch of these old things laying around we can give you and sell them for a lower cost. Also, they're probably like, please don't use ARM. But Lakefield is still brand new, and there's barely any SKUs for it. As they grow it out, they may go lower cost. But I don't think it's going to be like a bargain chip. And this is where ARM still has potential. But there's a lot of wiggle room, right, in this field. So companies could be, maybe AMD even, right? Any chance we'll see Microsoft get back to the fitness game with a Microsoft Band 4? I say 0%, maybe 1% chance. I don't see them getting back into this stuff at all. I still think they may do a wearable, and maybe from that perspective, they may do something around health. But we have seen literally nothing to suggest that they're doing that. I just can't believe that the Surface team isn't considering some sort of wearable. But I don't think they're going to do, if they do one, it's not going to be like Microsoft Band. It's not going to be an Apple Watch. It's going to be their own unique take on the technology that's different, and probably won't be like what we're expecting. So, I'm from Central America. How much you think the new mobile technology is better than LTE will be ready? I don't understand what that question means. I'm sorry. Apple is going to push ARM really hard. Will that mean that the Surface Pro X and other Windows 10 on ARM devices will benefit from this push? It won't hurt. As more people talk about ARM and computing, Microsoft's already been there for 2 to 3 years now. It also, competition's good. It helps drive Qualcomm, right? So I think it'll benefit. I think there's pros and cons. I think that Apple going to ARM doesn't solve the problems of iOS or Mac OS, and Windows going to ARM didn't solve the problems of Windows 10, right? So whatever issues people still have with these platforms will exist whether or not they go to ARM or not. Those are, I think, independent. Will the Kinect ever be revived? Probably not. I mean, they may add Windows Hello to a web camera for Xbox. That's totally plausible. But
did Microsoft still test Andromeda OS on the Duo when they switched to the A55? I don't think so. I think the last variant of the hardware that was running Andromeda OS was an 845. And you can actually see one of those remnants in Marques Brownlee's video. If you take a look at his Surface Duo video, Panos is holding a dark what looks like a Surface Duo, but that's actually an Andromeda. There is technically a difference between Andromeda and Surface Duo. Some minor hardware changes here and there, so much so that Microsoft actually changed the code name of the Duo. The Duo isn't technically codenamed Andromeda. It's the same hardware, more or less, with tweaks and changes here and there, but Duo is technically an entirely different project because it does run Android as well. That's why when the Andromeda dead rumors showed up, technically they were right. But also not really, because they just moved the Andromeda project over to this new project, made it run Android instead, and changed the hardware a little bit here and there. If for those wondering, I don't think I've ever shared this, or maybe I have, I don't know, but the Duo is codenamed Epsilon, as far as I'm aware.
Dr. Disrespect just posted a video on YouTube.
Good for him.
Which suggests maybe he's coming to YouTube for streaming. What is your opinion on Microsoft making a deal with Apple to license Windows 10 and ARM for dual booting Macs? I think this is like not anyone's concern right now. I don't think Apple is worried or prioritizing dual booting, their Mac OS on ARM so it can run Windows. It's going to be a huge priority for them. I think they may eventually get around to it, and they'll do something with Microsoft if they want. And I don't think Microsoft cares either. Like, Microsoft can be like, oh, you really want to be a developer? Just go buy a Surface Book, or buy an existing Surface or MacBook Pro and just continue running Windows there. Yeah, I feel like the amount of people who are going to buy Mac OS on ARM and also want to dual boot into Windows is going to be a small market. Like, dual boot, I had my Mac set to dual boot. All I did was run Windows on it. I never went into Mac OS. The only people who are doing it are developers, and that's a small group of people, and I'm not sure they're going to benefit from buying what's going to be definitely a limited laptop, at least the first versions. Like, I think there's going to be a very good distinction between a MacBook Pro 16 running an Intel 6 or 8 core chip versus their first ARM devices. So Zach, you're not taking any of these questions. Why are you typing?
Sorry.
Are you guys thinking of buying an Xbox Series X or Series S? Well, hopefully Microsoft will just send me one to review, as they usually have in the past. Because otherwise, I don't know if I'd buy one. I'm not a huge gamer. I have to force myself to game. That's not saying I don't appreciate it, but I'd probably go for the Series X just because when I do like using Xbox, I use it every single day, just not always for gaming. But it all also comes down to price and all that. But I am also looking to get a PlayStation finally. I've never had one.
Traitor.
Yep, but they have some really cool games. That
They
Ghost
do.
game that just came out looks pretty awesome. There's that one with the girl, the bow and arrow game. What's that one called? I forgot.
Tomb Raider?
No, no, it's there. It's exclusive. There's also God of War, which I never played. Last of Us, which I've heard mixed things about. I don't know. There's like some game. Oh, and the Spider-Man game. I really want to try the Spider-Man game. So yeah, I mean, that goes to show you, I'm not even a hardcore gamer, and I'm finally being lured to Sony because of some of their game titles, which is exactly the whole argument for PlayStation. I think this debate about performance between the two is the dumbest crap I've ever heard. I don't think most people care. I think they're both going to be very good. I think it's going to come down to what games do you want to play on it. And to be honest, I see more cooler stuff coming out of Sony than Microsoft. Sorry, guys. And I'm not a Halo person. I'll try a new Halo. I'm not against it. But I'm not like Zach. I don't have it's not my Star Wars. So.
Yeah. Do you think there'll be any big improvements to Cortana for Surface Duo? I've got bad news for you. Cortana isn't even pre-installed on Surface Duo. Cortana on phones is dead. You'll see it in Outlook, you'll see it in Teams, but you won't see it as a standalone experience on Android or iOS. The default assistant on Surface Duo is Google Assistant. And you'll probably find that many Google apps are default on Surface Duo because that's the way it is. Google Phone, Google Messages, Google Photos, I believe, are all default on Surface Duo. At least with V1, maybe V2 that'll be different.
Oh yeah, so the game I was talking about was Horizon Zero Dawn, and I guess the sequel is coming out or something. I don't know. Just looks like a cool game. I don't know.
I have the Cortana app on Android standalone app, and it still works. Well, you are one of very few people. That app is, as far as I'm aware, in it's abandoned. I don't think it gets any or many updates at all. If it does get updates, it's literally just, I don't know, bug fixes at most. No new features. That thing. I mean, we've been told from people who probably know what they're talking about when it comes to Cortana that app isn't going to be around for much longer.
Do you guys know why Microsoft is not releasing version 2004, the Surface Pro X? You can actually install it. If you just go into the Insider release preview, it should install. I'm running it on my Pro X. There are issues. I think one of them is, we talked about this last week, OneDrive breaks for some people. So that's a pretty big bug. But apparently, if you uninstall OneDrive, like, you may be able to directly install it. I've also seen green screens of death with that version of Windows on ARM devices, including the Galaxy Flex 5G. Sorry, Lenovo Flex 5G. So I think there's still some issues, unfortunately, with the May updates for Windows 10, which is listen to last week's podcast. We went off about that.
Do you know why Windows is so laggy? Well, it depends on your hardware, I guess.
Yeah.
How are you liking the Surface Buds? Ever get a chance to compare them to the Pixel Buds? I didn't. Don't know about you, Dan.
I do not have the Pixel Buds. I don't wear headphones enough to justify me going out and buying more. Although I guess it'd be interesting to compare, but I'm pretty happy with these Surface Buds. Like, maybe the Google ones are like way better. I'm just missing out. It's one of those ignorance is bliss kind of things, but I've been happy with them.
Yeah, I'd say the fit and finish could be better for the Surface earbuds. I'm not a huge fan of the case. Things like putting the earphone out should pause the music, but it doesn't. It is missing some stuff like that. Like if you've used AirPods, you know how satisfying opening and closing that AirPods case is. It's it's sublime. The Surface earbuds case does not have that same level of attention to detail. But these are all things they can improve with version 2 and whatnot. But I think from an audio listening and comfort perspective, rather, they're great. I think they sound great. I think they're very comfortable. Yeah, and the battery life seems to be really good as well. I'm yet to get to a point where I'm running low on battery after even a day's use. I put them I'll wear them for an hour or 2 hours. Excuse me. Put them in the case for a while, take them back out, wear them for another 1 hour, 2 hours, and I'm yet to hear the woman on there say, "Your battery is low. Please plug me in."
Yeah, it's true. Yep, they are mad comfortable. Someone said they sent me a screenshot of a Cortana update on Android. I almost vaguely remember that, but two things. One, I kind of don't care. I mean, Cortana on Android as a standalone app there's nothing to talk about. It doesn't even do anything really much anymore. I guess they did an update maybe just to, who knows. Second, I don't have access to my Twitter anymore. So I may get it back someday, but I don't have access to my DMs or anything in there. So that's fine.
Question: should we expect a Surface Pro X2 this year? I may have more to share about this in the future, but I think maybe. I think we might.
Oh, that'd be interesting.
Yeah.
Of course, we talked about that last week. The only thing they can kind of really do is bump the processor to what's considered to be the 8CX Plus, and maybe they could do stuff there, but I don't think it would be a massive rethinking of it, because I still say the Pro X is still my favorite Surface. I think it's basically kind of perfect. Just put anti-reflective layer for the display.
If they did do a Pro X2 this year, it would be to push a significant software improvement.
Oh, the 64-bit support.
Yeah, I think that would be, if it does happen this year, I think that would be what it's trying to push.
Yeah. Yeah, for Curtis, yeah. If you're saying again, Dan, regarding my Twitter, yeah, we talked about it for the opening of the podcast. I and a lot of people with verified accounts, if you try to change your password in the last 30 days due to the hack the other day, they kind of locked everybody's accounts. And so it'll eventually get unlocked, apparently. So says Twitter, but who knows?
How about Neo? I'm assuming you're asking just what's the status of Neo. So it's difficult for Neo because it's not like it's been postponed to a specific date. It's just been postponed because of the ongoing pandemic and the economy and stuff. The reason they're not shipping it is because they don't know if there is a market for it, if nobody has jobs and there's a virus that's killing people. Like these experimental PC form factors don't really have a place when the world is like that. So it really does depend on how quickly we can get this cleaned up. If coronavirus goes away in a year and the economy recovers and everyone's got their jobs back and stuff, then perhaps we'll see Neo sometime next year. If things don't improve, then we probably won't see Neo sometime next year. The problem, of course, is depending on how long Microsoft holds the Neo for. There's going to come a point where that device is too old to ship, so they'll have to release the second gen Neo. But will they call that Neo 2, or will they just say, "Oh, here's the Neo, it's updated"? We'll have to see. But yeah, I do think Microsoft wants to do it next year, probably toward the end of next year, I would guess. But we'll have to see.
Do you think Windows cares to match Apple's Pencil performance? I don't draw a lot, so I'm really not a good person to ask here. I think Microsoft is mostly, yeah, they court a lot of people who draw, artists, engineers, that kind of thing. But a lot of the inking stuff is also around note taking and using it in Windows. And Microsoft definitely seems to prioritize that a little bit more than the drawing stuff. And I don't know, I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I'm just saying that it is a difference. When I had an iPad and I had the Pencil, for me, it was kind of useless because I didn't draw. And so I couldn't use that pencil like in anything. I couldn't really use it for note taking, and it didn't work in all the apps. Like Microsoft has actually done a pretty good job with making pen support work throughout Windows, including like replacing the keyboard, right? I think that's where their focus has been. I'm not saying it's great. I'm not saying it can't be better. And it's right. A lot of people are pointing out that the pen system hasn't really even been updated since like 2017. It's true. They've done no more pressure levels, no more improvements on tilts. They haven't talked more about the processor, the co-processor that they developed that runs underneath the display to make all the magic happen. So hopefully, I can't imagine they're not working on it. That's Steve Batchy, one of their chief engineers that works on this in display technology. I imagine they're working on some major revamp that will happen, but unless Zach has anything to add to that, I don't know.
So what's that in regards to, sorry?
The Surface Pen. It hasn't really been updated since 2017.
Oh, yeah, the technology. Like, they changed the form factor of the Slim Pen and stuff. But no, yeah, you're right. Well, yeah, they haven't. But I don't think there's much need. I know that Surfaces have this issue where if you draw a line slowly enough, the line isn't straight. Right. I don't know why they haven't fixed that. I'm assuming it's a really deep issue that requires an entire re-engineering of the, I guess, pen layer that they use in the screen technology more than the pen itself. But I think regarding milliseconds and stuff, is that a pen issue or is that a screen issue? I think that's a screen issue again, right? It's on the screen side.
Well, they have that co-processor that helps with the latency. But there's been no, like, improvements to even that. But I can't believe they're not working on it, but we just haven't heard anything. But it's true. I would hope, I think the really interesting device this year that may come out and we're expecting would be Surface Pro 8. We're expecting that to have sort of a major redesign. And it's funny because I was using the Pro 7 just the other night, And it's like I still have a tough time. I love the Pro 7's performance. Like it really is great. But the bezels and the screen compared to the Pro X is just not as good. But I'm really looking forward to whatever I think the Pro 8 is going to be like a really major change for the Pro. I'm hoping at least. I'm hoping for a redesign, thinner bezels, new processor, maybe Lakefield in there, as well as possibly, I would presume, new pen technology that would be even better. Because I feel like that would be the device to do it on. But I don't know, Zach, have you heard anything about a Pro 8 and rumors?
Yeah. So the rumor, I haven't heard personally, but a redesigned Pro 8 is supposedly coming this year. And by redesign, we mean we'll be following the sort of the similar design as the Pro X. So if you take a look at the Surface Pro X, think that, but with the Pro 8, maybe it's a bit thicker with a USB-A port still, but that will be sort of what the Pro 8 is more or less about. Someone's asking, are we expecting this October's event to be like as big as last year's? Unless you're expecting, we're not expecting a new phone. So I don't think it'll be as big as last year, but there'll be some nice improvements, like laptop 4 with the new AMD processors would be great. Pro 8, if it does have the redesign, will be a nice upgrade for those users as well. Possibly a Pro X2 with, I guess, the 8CX Plus, which may even also be the debut of 64-bit app emulation. I also...
So I was asking about the AMD on Surface Pro 8. I don't think that'll happen. I think the Surface Pro 8 is going to be an Intel device. Because the question is, can they do AMD Ryzen 5 fanless? I've never seen that. I'm not saying it can't be done. I'm saying that's the advantage of Intel has. They can make a fanless Core i5 that performs well. AMD still run hot, in my opinion. Maybe that's solvable, but that's the issue. So,
yeah, and also a Studio 3, I think we're expecting this year, or some kind of studio monitor that also is modular, or along those lines. I don't know. That's more. I think Brad Sams has written about that more than anyone else. I've not heard anything specific. Someone's asking, do you think there might be a way for Microsoft to maintain the raised keyboard but slimming the bezels to an iPad level? And if not, do you think that they would ever ditch that in favor of slimmer bezels? In regards to what device? The Pro X or the Neo? I don't know what device we're talking about. I'll answer both. In regards to the Pro X, the problem with the Pro X is that the keyboard needs to lift up, doesn't it? You are talking about the Pro X because of the raised keyboard. If it has to, unless they do virtual bezels, which could be done, they have the patent for it. You do need to have that bottom bezel there, and by extension, that top bezel just to make it look even. Because it would look dumb if it had 3 sides of thin bezel and then 1 thick chin. It just wouldn't look nice. But yeah, virtual bezels can solve that when the keyboard isn't raised. It could be full screen, like edge to edge almost. But then when you dock it up, you could have just the desktop rise up a little bit and go on a merry way. It could be done through software. It could absolutely be done. But again, we'll have to wait and see how that works. So will the Pro also be out of aluminium? That's a good question. I don't know. I would assume not. Magnesium is like one of the selling points for me when it comes to the Surface Pro line. In fact, I prefer magnesium over the aluminium Microsoft uses in the laptop. And the Pro X, for some reason, I just prefer magnesium. But we'll have to wait and see. I don't know. Those are like really intricate details that I just don't know the answers to. If the Surface Pro X2 can do 64-bit emulation, would the same capability be brought to the Surface Pro X? I would assume so, right? Like, I can't imagine there's a huge difference in performance when it comes to the 8CX and the 8CX Plus, but I don't know. Right. I don't know enough about this yet, which is why I haven't written a story on it. But, it could be exclusive to the Pro X2 and onward. But I don't know. I think it would be a mistake to do that, but if it's a performance issue, then there's nothing they can do about it, right? Are you going to watch the Xbox event next Thursday? Any game you would like to see revealed? Yes, and Halo Infinite.
Yes, but no, I don't have any game I'm looking forward to. Maybe Gray Surface earbuds in October. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, possibly. Or maybe with Duo.
Could be with Duo.
It launches. Yep. I mean, there was a picture of Panos. He looked like he was wearing gray earbuds.
I mean,
It's
they
hard
were
to
at the
tell.
October event, right? We have photos of them. I touched one.
Yep.
It's like they did
Mhm.
exist.
Yep.
It is a weird grey. It's like a light. It's because you got like the platinum color, which I think is just grey, like light grey or silver. But then this other grey is like it's like a darker grey, almost like
Yeah.
a darker blue
Yeah. It's not
grey.
black. It's dark gray.
Yeah, which makes me wonder: will they do a duo in that color? I would assume. I don't think they will though, because I've not seen one. I've seen many duos internally and online now, and none of them have been any other color apart from this glacier white. So maybe Duo 2 will be where the colors are introduced. Similar to the Pro X.
Saw some things. Microsoft has some patents for a new smartphone. Oh, sorry. I hate patent talk.
Me too.
Patents are the dumbest thing. Listen, Microsoft's going to make a lot of patents because they have smart people working for them who are engineers and scientists, and they literally invent stuff. And you protect your property by patenting it, so no one else doesn't come up with the same idea and then make money from it. But patents literally have nothing to do with products coming to market. I think Microsoft has a lot of patents, a lot of things they're exploring and trying out. They've shown a smart speaker. It was at Build 2 years ago. It was a smart speaker that was powered with Cortana that also could do live translations, and it was used in a productivity. It was an office environment. It was showing how this thing could take notes. Like they've talked about coming up with these technologies. Is it going to be for consumers? Never. Like they're not going to do a smart speaker. That market's gone for them. I've ranted about this before. The Alexa speaker market and all this kind of crap. It's like, it's fine. Go buy an Alexa for $40 and have it tell you the weather. They're not in that business anymore. They're not going to be doing that. I think it's smart. They may make something for like a Surface Hub that works for an office environment that ties into the rest of their technologies. But that's why I don't get excited about something like that.
Any updates on the Duo price? I hope it's under 1K. If not, then then they will rip it for the older internals, and Microsoft will make a poor first impression, in my humble opinion. Microsoft doesn't care about first impressions because they've proven time and time again that they can overcome them. Surface RT, terrible first impression. In fact, I'd say the first two generations of Surface Pro were bad, and people didn't like them. The form factor didn't work great until the Pro 3, where things took off. Microsoft isn't worried about your first impressions being not great on Surface Duo because they know this isn't going to sell well, and they also know that they have a version 2 in the works, and they also have plans for a version 3, and they can see where they're going, and they can see that this is going to rock the boat and stuff. Listen, if you're somebody who is looking for a good phone, don't buy the Duo 1. Save your money, wait for the Duo 2 or even the Duo 3. Because those will be better phones in addition to this other stuff that the Duo is pushing. Duo 1 focuses entirely on the form factor and the dual screen setup. It's a phone second. It's still a phone, but being a phone isn't the main priority for this device. It's more being a Surface in your pocket with pen support, dual screens, just sort of getting the groundwork done for the version of Android that runs on Surface Duo, which is very fluid and intuitive. It's getting that stuff done first with Duo 1. This is for enthusiasts, Surface fans, people who are looking for a good phone. This device isn't for you.
So it's saying regarding speakers, I know I just hate Amazon and Google. I feel you. Like, I totally get it. Go buy an Apple speaker then. Be one of the 10 people who own that thing. Yeah, I'm not a person talking about this stuff. I have a couple Alexas. I use one in the bedroom for alarms and to set timers to wake up from a nap, which you don't need Alexa for, right? Like you can make a smart alarm clock that just does that. And the other one just tells me to take the beer out of the freezer so it doesn't explode. That's as much as I use these things. Jez apparently likes using them to call his brother to tell him to go pick up food for him or something like that. So he may be a better critique of these things. I do not like smart speakers at all. I think they're kind of weird. I also don't use TikTok. So
yeah. It is version 3 Duo development news. I would definitely be confident about V2, but this is the first I've heard about V3. V3 isn't in development. They know what they would want in a V3 if they get to it.
It's a sketch on a napkin right now.
Because they have a roadmap, right? They have like Duo 1 has this features, it's pushing this idea. We'll focus on this, this, and this. Duo 2, we improve upon this and this. We add this feature, we change this here. Duo 3, etc., etc. Duo 1's done, so Duo 2 development is now underway internally, and Duo 3 will be next, assuming they get to Duo 3, which I think they will. I think I've said this before, but I'm pretty sure Microsoft doesn't commit to a product line unless they can get 3 generations out of it.
I imagine in 3, they're going to, when you're that far out, it's about then bringing in tech that's not available today, that is going to presumably be available and be able to be used then. Because that's like the issue. And related to that, someone's asking about 90, higher refresh rate for displays and Surface devices. Lenovo had a leak this week with a bunch of their stuff came out, and one of their laptops is going to apparently have, like Ultrabook, is going to have a 90 hertz display, and this is like a ThinkPad, right? I think that's a sign that we will start to see this stuff as a technology. The problem with high refresh rates is they suck up your battery, and everybody's been, they just came out with 1 watt displays to improve the efficiency of a display. So this idea of like you reduce the power consumption, now you want to do something that drives up the power consumption again. So I think there's that balance that they're trying to figure out. If they get new processors that give them more battery life, then they can maybe put that battery life to, make it a wash and putting in a higher refresh rate. I think we will start to see that stuff. I don't know if the Surface team, I've criticized them in the past where I get it. They're more conservative. They don't put brand new spanking technology in their products a lot of times. I keep ranting about anti-reflective layers. It's a pretty basic thing in my opinion, and they're still not there. So maybe, but I don't know.
Do you think the Neo will follow that same pattern where it's just about getting the form factor out the door, but V1 will be a pass for most people? Yeah, I think most Surface V1s are that way. Surface RT was the same. I'd argue the Surface Pro 1 was the same as well. The only one that really wasn't was the Surface Laptop. I thought the Surface Laptop was pretty polished out the gate. But Surface Book 1 will add many problems at launch, and it wasn't perfect. And of course Surface Duo and Surface Neo as well. And even the Surface Studio, when the Surface Studio launched, it really was about the form factor. It launched with last generation specs, and so did the Surface Studio 2. They didn't fix that with Surface Studio 2, although they didn't. The performance was much better. But with Studio 1, that was a last gen product when it was announced. But it was all about the form factor, right? Same for Duo, same for Neo. Just Surface products V1 are usually just for like people who are interested in the form factor above everything else. And I guess there is a market for that, right?
Is the Surface Duo better than the Lumia 930? I'm not answering that question.
How dare you make me read
Ask
that question out loud.
Yeah, seriously. All right, now I'm bored. We're done. I'm going to go eat. It's Friday. I need to go buy beer.
Nice. Okay, thank you everyone for tuning in. We'll be back next Friday as always. Follow us on Twitter. We'll keep you updated when we're going live and all of that good stuff. But until then, we will see you next time. Goodbye.